Kia ora, welcome to Central News for Monday the 8th of September. I'm Hilary Entwistle. A 36-hour window used to identify how to future-proof the Kaimai Tunnel for forecast freight train volumes will begin in the coming weeks. The repair work starting September the 13th is the first of its kind since the tunnel's opening in 1978, signalling a more direct freight link between Waikato and the Bay of Plenty. Kiwi Rail Senior Communications Advisor David Miller says the work, the start of a 4-year $10 million project, looks at identifying the upgrade requirements needed to future-proof the tunnel and meet forecasted freight volumes in coming years. On average, 153 services use the Kaimai Tunnel each week, including weekends, and this number is forecast to increase. More than 4,000 Waikato people with high health needs, the majority of them children, now face a healthier future thanks to a project run by Te Puna Ora Ngā. Waikato District's Health Board Māori Health Services, the Warm Our Whare Free Floor and Ceiling Insulation Project, has reached over 1,000 homes in Hamilton and South Waikato. Te Puna Ora Ngā General Manager Dietrich Tamatea explains what the initiative aims to do.
Well, Warm Our Whare is actually part of an initiative that we call Project 270, and Project 270 is the DHB's project, if you like, to mitigate the impacts on child poverty within the Waikato DHB district, and it comprises of 3 parts, and Warm Our Whare is one of those parts. And Warm Our Whare basically puts free home insulation to the floors and ceilings of high needs families. The criteria is that you have to have a home that's built before 2000, because generally speaking homes after that period have insulation. You also have to be low income, so have a community services card. You need to have children living in your household that's 17 years and under, alternatively be 65 years plus. And the other thing is have a health condition. And if you own the home, you can still apply, and if you actually rent the home, you can apply also, but you have to have approval from your landlord.
It's 378 days since the Steamers smoked an opposition side, and they were on fire yesterday, toasting a 21-14 scorcher over a lukewarm North Harbour. The Blue and Gold team took to the field in a clash with North Harbour at Rotorua International Stadium, improving on their disappointing 29-27 loss against Manawatu in Palmerston North on September the 3rd. In front of a willing crowd in Rotorua, the Steamers emerged triumphant, 21-14 against North Harbour, with the visitors now 0 from 4 and bottom of the ITM Cup Championship after the first month. A pōwhiri to welcome visiting rowing crews to Hamilton will be held at Te Kohinga Marama Marae at the University of Waikato on Wednesday, September the 10th. Crews from Melbourne, Washington and Harvard universities will be in Hamilton to compete against the University of Waikato in the Gallagher Great Race, which takes place over 3.85 kilometres on the Waikato River on Sunday, September the 14th. In the men's race, Waikato will face Harvard and Melbourne for the Harry Mahone Memorial Trophy, while the Waikato women will take on Washington and Melbourne for the Brian Gold Cup. Now for the marine forecast, West Coast, Raglan. Tuesday morning it's becoming a northeast 15 knots. High tide is at 9:59 a.m. East Coast Bay of Plenty, northeast 10 knots developing in the afternoon, and it's mostly fine out there. At 6:41 a.m. is your high tide time in Tauranga. Still to come on Central News, pensioner housing, Kaimai Speed Trail, the effect on heavy vehicles, and your weather for tomorrow. Welcome to Central News on TV Central. A 12-kilometre stretch of the highway between State Highway 28 on the Waikato side and Soldiers Road on the Tauranga side will be part of the 2-year trial, which is the first of its kind in this country. 4 webcams and 22 electronic variable signs will be activated in adverse weather, with speed limits typically reduced to 60 kilometres per hour on the steeper Waikato side of the summit and 80 kilometres per hour on the Tauranga flank, depending on the weather. I spoke with the NZTA safety guru to find out if the major freight route having differing speeds will create difficulty for heavier trucks.
I actually don't think that the altered speed limits would actually have much effect on trucks. I think that the trucks are typically governed by their power to weight ratio, the load that they are carrying over the kaimai, and also their braking ability downhill. And so I actually don't think that the lowered speed limits, temporary lowered speed limits, would actually have much effect on trucks at all. In fact, I think what it will do, it will bring the light vehicles who aren't so affected by gradient and load, it'll bring their speed down closer to the truck. So I think it will calm that traffic condition speeds down a little.
There's going to be 22 electronic variable signs. Is there a bit of a worry that that amount of signage could create distraction?
Yeah, the 22 signs is a little bit misleading. A number of those signs are actually located up the side roads that the travelling public won't see, but that's to tell people who are coming off the side roads of a lowered speed limit on the main road they are turning onto. It won't appear to be that many signs. We will have gated signs, and what I mean by gated signs is there'll be signs on both sides of the road as you enter the lower speed limit area. And then after that, it will actually only be about one sign, roughly about every 1.5 kilometres apart. So I don't think it will seem like an overkill of signs.
So once you enter that gated space of road, there's a blanket speed?
No, it will potentially be 2 speeds. It will be, if you're travelling from Tauranga to Hamilton, when you enter that gated area, it could be 80 kilometres an hour on the Tauranga side of the summit, but as you go across the summit and down on the Waikato side on the windier bit, it could lower to 60 kilometres an hour.
Begs the question, why not change it permanently?
The reason not to change it permanently is that in dry conditions, the road safety problem is not so great up there. Our crashes, a large proportion of those associated with wet road conditions, not dry. It is a nationally important freight route. It is a nationally important strategic link between the Waikato and Bay of Plenty. So it's important to keep efficiency of that network up when the conditions are appropriate.
Will the speeds shown be suggested speeds, or are they a speed limit? Will they be enforceable?
They will be legal speeds. They will be, it will look like a speed limit roundel. It will have the red boundary border around the number, and that actually makes it a legal speed limit, and so it is enforceable. That's not the objective of this. The objective is to advise motorists that there are different speeds appropriate for different road conditions.
Are the police on board? I mean, potentially it could create more work for them trying to enforce these speeds, but in the long run, less work with less crashes, hopefully.
The police are definitely on board with us. The police support it. In fact, the police approached us about doing something like this a number of years ago. I think it's the opposite. At the moment, the police deploy a lot of their resources up to the kaimai in adverse conditions, particularly during the winter, to an attempt to calm traffic speeds and calm road user behaviour. If this trial is successful and people moderate their driving behaviour in accordance with those altered speed limits, then I think long term it could reduce the demand on the police to have to be up there.
Are drivers driving to the conditions currently?
Most of them do, but there's a small proportion that don't. And the police records of crashes on the kaimai suggest that about 40% of them are driving too fast for those conditions. That doesn't necessarily mean they're speeding, it just means they're driving too fast for the road conditions at the time. And so there is a proportion that potentially aren't slowing adequately enough for adverse weather conditions. However, in saying that, some of those conditions are very difficult to see and determine. You know, light rain can make a road very, very slippery, or just dampness on the surface. And those conditions that drivers possibly aren't aware that the road is as slippery as it is. And secondly, things like black ice. Drivers can't see that, and therefore, you know, it's not surprising that some of them don't alter their driving conditions accordingly.
How do you measure the success of the trial?
Long term, the success of the trial would be a reduction in crashes in adverse weather conditions, but that would be a long-term trend. It takes time to monitor that. So our short-term measure of success is looking at a reduction in the higher end speeds in when the signs are on, and so in adverse conditions. And another measure of successes would be drivers understanding, having a greater understanding of driving to different conditions.
And if successful, will there be other places that you'll look at doing a similar thing?
Yes, I think there's a number of areas throughout New Zealand that this could be used in. Another one that we are considering at the moment is the Rimutaka Ranges north of Wellington. But I'm sure that there are several locations around New Zealand where this might be appropriate. There are some highways where that aren't quite so strategically important, and we could look at a permanent lowering speed limit if we had a similar sort of problem. However, I think on very strategic important highways, then this technology allows you to allow drivers to drive at higher speeds when the conditions are appropriate and lower speeds when they're not.
Coming up next, pensioner housing in Hamilton. Welcome back to Central News. Hamilton's pensioner housing stock is under the spotlight with a proposal to sell the council's entire portfolio. Senior citizen advocates are vowing to fight the move, saying any sell-off could see Hamilton's most vulnerable end up on the street. Hamilton Mayor spoke with Anne-Marie and explained why the council is looking to sell off its pensioner housing stock.
So we've been working on this for the last 6 or so months in a working group, and we've been looking at all the different options for our social housing portfolio. We provide housing for older persons in the city, and that's a great service that we do provide. So recently the government has changed the law. So over the last couple of years the government has been looking at how it can grow the social housing sector, the private sector, to deliver more social housing for New Zealand. They've made a couple of key changes in the law. The first is they've opened up capital funding to the social housing sector, and secondly they have enabled income related rent subsidies that have previously only been available to Housing New Zealand. They're now available to the social housing sector. Now, two things have come from that. Number one, local government is not able to apply for either of those, and that's been specifically stated. And secondly, what the government has signalled is that they want to grow social housing in New Zealand, but they see that there is a role for others to play in that, not just Housing New Zealand. So we've taken that information and looked at how that impacts on us delivering this service. The other thing we know is that the social housing sector provides wraparound services. They provide health services, budgeting services, trips and Meals on Wheels and social engagement that we don't provide. We are a landlord and we do a great job of that, but we don't provide those extra services that are very important often for people that do live alone. The other thing is we've looked at the finances, of course, and we have a lot of capital investment that needs to go into our housing stock. It's quite old. A lot of it was built in a certain age and stage of life, and it needs major investment to get it fit for purpose for older persons. So things like showers and mobility scooter charging areas and lighting, and also insulation. So we can't provide a lot of that, and it would require significant capital investment. So we put all that into the mix. We've had a lot of discussions with the social housing sector and looked at what they could offer, and we're going to take a proposal now out to the public for feedback on whether the council should cease the service and offer the units to the social housing sector to buy.
The notion of selling the pensioner housing has raised some anxieties for the residents. Are they justified in their worrying?
Look, I think change is always really unsettling, particularly for our older persons, and we've been really careful to keep our tenants informed. We had a meeting with them to explain what was happening, and we do accept that this is going to be a difficult time for them, and we want to work through it carefully with them. One of the things that was really important to the council was that taking the proposition to the social housing sector and for them to purchase meant that the tenants could remain in the units, and I think that's for me that was a very important part of it. Tenants come and go in our complexes, but we do a really good job of looking after them, and it's their home, and we do want to make sure that the process works for them and that they, their homes and how they live are protected through that process.
Once the statement of proposal has been adopted, Council will undertake full public consultation followed by a hearings process, which is likely to be later this year. Then what happens?
So when we finish that hearings process, and that's sort of planned to be around about November, the Council will then take all that information and all the submissions and make a final decision. So that final decision could be we will proceed as we have proposed. It could be we will still proceed but we'll make some changes, or it might be that we're not going to go ahead and do what we've said in the proposal. So there's still a lot of options for the Council. It is an issue that is going to be debated in the community. We put out a comprehensive discussion paper in March about all of these issues and the challenges that we were facing. And we're not alone. Other local councils across New Zealand are also looking at their own pensioner housing and the complexes that they own as well. So I think if within local government there is a lot of discussion going on about this service, and other councils are certainly looking at it. So we feel we've done a really good job of looking at it all, and hopefully the process works for everyone.
City safety is a priority for Hamilton City Council at the moment. Tell me what's happening.
So again, we've been doing a lot of work on this. The legal highs really put a spotlight on safety in the central city for us, and a lot of feedback, negative feedback about behaviours. So we've been working really closely with police, the business association, and health and social services providers in the city to try and come up with a plan to deal with these challenges. So we think we've done that, and we're very pleased with the plan that we're taking to the council. So that plan's sort of multifaceted, I guess. It's a complex issue, safety, lots of things go into it. But we've taken the approach that there are behaviours that are acceptable and not acceptable. And it's our responsibility when we manage public spaces to define those in a common sense way. So we are taking a proposal for a public safety bylaw out to the public for consultation, and that bylaw will define about nuisance behaviour and the sort of things that we're going to say are not acceptable. The other side of the plan is a wonderful project, a collaborative project that the social sector have brought together. It's called the People's Project, and it has a space on Victoria Street, and that is designed to work collaboratively with all of the social sector agencies that are needed to work together to provide support for our vulnerable people and those who are living on the streets. And this is a new initiative, and I think a very, very exciting one for the city. So,
how's it going to work?
Yeah, so we've taken the approach that, you've got to define behaviours that are acceptable and not, and enforce those. But at the same time, you've got to offer a pathway and support for those in need. And, public spaces are for everyone, but they are community spaces, and we need to manage that behaviour. So I think that's a pretty exciting thing for the city, and we're hoping that this will, go some way to addressing a lot of concerns that people have had. There's lots of other things in the safety plan that I think are new, again, for Hamilton. One of the things we're looking at will be enforcing litter, disposal of litter, and looking at infringement notices for litter. We've looked around at lots of cities across Australia, New Zealand and the world actually, and what we found is that when cities have faced these issues, they have defined what's acceptable and not, and they have followed that up with enforcement, but at the same time they have created, put investment into amenity and making the spaces nice and beautiful and offering those who need support the support they do need.
For more details on the Hamilton City Council, go to hamilton.gov.nz. Just ahead, your weather for tomorrow, and St John's sees a funding boost. Welcome back. A joint funding initiative from St John, ACC and the Ministry of Health will see an extra 158 frontline ambulance staff members join St John by July next year. Anne-Marie spoke with Territory Manager for the North Waikato St John Central Region, Craig Scott, who explained how the extra staff will make a difference.
They will notice that we've become more patient focused, and by doing that we will improve our service response times and obviously reduce single crewing.
Now, this is obviously going to increase the safety for both patients and staff. Tell me about that.
Yes, it is a priority. It's something that St John's 100% committed to full crew our vehicles. In that way that we will be able to provide a better care to our communities.
What difference is the extra funding going to make to the Waikato Bay of Plenty region?
Single crewing, is not the ideal, and St John has always been committed to provide full crewing, and that's why we have campaigning for volunteers for full crewing, and of course this 158 new positions will make a big difference to that. With full crewing, we respond, it's going to be better for the patient care, because we can provide that better care and be more focused, and from a safety point of view that people will see there's a double crewing.
That's potentially huge for those areas.
With the Waikato and the Bay of Plenty, the funding is going to allow us to put 2 crew members in Huntly, 6 in Hamilton, and 2 in Te Amutu, 1 in Otahonga and 1 in Te Kuiti, 2 for Tauranga and 4 in the Mount Maunganui. Oh, it's going to be enormous. Huntly, for example, is a struggling area, to get volunteers. So, predominantly the vehicles up there are single crewed, so this will make a big difference.
Tell me about the types of staff you're going to be recruiting. Trained, untrained, paramedics?
It'll be a mixture of paramedics, a mixture of emergency medical technicians, emergency medical assistants, and patient transfer officers. And a mix of that will depend on the priorities of the individual needs for each area.
How does someone become an ambulance officer? Do you have to have a medical background?
You don't have to have a medical background. As one of the main requirements, that you have to have a current first aid certificate, a clean police record, and a New Zealand citizenship, and a full driver's licence. As far as personal attributes, obviously honesty, integrity are very important. Cultural sensitivity. Also have the passion to have the, for your community to be people focused, and provide the extra care. And somebody who wants to become a volunteer would obviously the advertisement, or it could be word of mouth, and they would apply, and they'd go through quite a rigorous assessment program.
For more details, go to stjohn.org.nz. Weather for Tuesday now. Hamilton looking like you'll have a fine day with light winds. Your expected high is 16 and an overnight low of 5. The rest of the Waikato the same, mostly fine with light winds. Paeroa, you can expect a high of 15 and an overnight low of 8. Matamata 14 and 7. Te Awamutu 16 and 5. Tokoroa 15 and 6. Tauranga, long fine spells with the chance of a shower. Your expected high is 16 and an overnight low of 9. The rest of the bay, fine spells, possibly a shower or 2, and light winds. Te Puke, you can expect a high of 14 and an overnight low of 9. That is the program for tonight. You can like us on Facebook, centralnews.tv, or email us news@tvcentral.co.nz. On tomorrow night's show, we find out about the Warm Alwhare initiative and the Great Gallagher Race. I'm Hilary Entwistle. I hope you have a lovely evening.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.